Again, I am glad for the presence of my Astartes bodyguard, as the Mechanicus is very, very interested in the origin of those relics they have received. They might have grabbed me and drained my brain otherwise, warrant of trade or not. Salvaging ancient archaeotech is dangerous, Lord Pef. You need to let the Mechanicus spearhead the reclamation. The Fabricator General says and offers me another plate of cake and tea. I was never treated this well, not even by Antax. Still, the cake is very good and even Ludvius seems to like it, if his thumb means what it should mean, instead of run. Our ship is in orbit above. I smile politely. Margus Explorer Gyron of Forge Antax is helping with that effort, Fabricator. You have seen what they did for me, upgrading my cruiser to highest Mechanicus standard. He nods in silence and turns toward the cogitator screen, and prints a long list of possible rewards. I could gain another armored regiment and a destroyer, or a light cruiser, and a dozen Fellblades heavy tanks. It is very nice, and the cakes tastes great. What I need is 1,000 Deimos pattern corvettes, Fabricator. Hopefully armed with laser batteries or plasma cannons, but you know better what's possible or not. And I'll make sure you receive a transport hauler full of Mechanicus relics. I demand in a meek voice. I do need a large fleet, and a dedicated forge world to keep making cheap ships for the Imperium afterwards. Numbers have a quality of their own, like the Tyranids and the Orcs prove constantly. The Fabricator almost scowls in disgust. For someone like him, cheap corvettes have the same value as Chimera tanks. Disposable trash. It is possible, Captain Pef. It will take 5 decades though, and divert nearly half of the shipyard's production for this single task. He replies after a minute of deep computation. Forge Metallica can do it in 3 decades, and that's because the Navy has ordered 500 such ships already. So 2 decades is sufficient, if and only if you really want this kind of trade, Margus Terrian. I muse out loud. I was there when the Corvette order was placed after all, so delays like this won't work on me. I might have time, and gain more time due to warp travel, but it doesn't mean I can afford to waste it. More than that, I am considering sending transport ships towards Forge World in other sectors, and just beg to be granted the first batch of new corvettes in return. It won't work that well without my personal presence, but I will gain goodwill anyway. A megaton of adamantium plates and various relics among them should make any fabricator quite generous, even if only by peer pressure, like I'm attempting now. The future is uncertain, Lord Pef. That transport ship you promise might never arrive, or get caught in a storm and arrive millennia later. The Fabricator argues back, and this time I have no recourse. It is true, obviously. Ships vanish in the warp all the time. Also, Jaren might give in to greed and obsession for knowledge and confiscate everything for Antax, or himself. Yes, you are right, Fabricator. But even then, the Navy always needs ships, so they'll be requisitioned by the next admiral to pass by for certain. I only need 1,000 ships. The Navy needs millions. I conclude and go to pick a few more gifts for my clan. A dozen Fellblades wouldn't go amiss, nor another fighter squadron and 1,000 new Chimeras. Then I scroll down and poke a power armor template. The cheapest one. You already have armor, and it is of good quality. The Fabricator comments with a wave of tentacles. Ah, that's his limit. Boarding operations are very dangerous, Fabricator. My Void Marines, or at least the officers. I propose in a small voice. Fine. Light power armor for 100 officers. In 3 decades. Now go, before you empty all the stasis cells. He orders me and opens the armor door to his study. A Death Watch Marine peeks inside. It's only the trader, Inquisitor. And his bloody guard, of course. The black-armored veteran explains as my Rose enters the study room. Ludvius growls in annoyance. Watch your words, brother. Nice to meet you again, Inquisitor. He adds a second later. Rose giggles as if amused. Boys will be boys. I nod politely and leave, feeling her power brush against my mind in welcome. She must be at least a beta-level psyker, to manage that feat. Not someone I would normally keep company with. Our navigator, Lord Duros, is only a gamma level, and he seems quite bothered by blanks, recoiling from Justine with visible pain. Not that much by me, because I don't turn off his powers by mere presence. In the next month, we repair and provision the cruiser with new consumables, and my new armor regiment, then replenish the lower deck serfs and load new servitors and 1,000 more tech priests. Rose requisitions a regiment for herself, an auxiliary guard regiment with another 1,000 tech priests and more advanced weaponry. The difference from the regular regiments is quite obvious, as even the regular guardsmen have carapace armor and vox beads, not to mention melter guns and missile launchers for every single vehicle. The litany is full to capacity now, and the life support systems struggle to keep up with the increased demands. Luckily I have all the idle tech priests and servitors, to maintain the ship in optimum condition. We depart for a Navy base, where we will regroup with escorts and other Navy ships conscripted by Rose for our beacon quest. Tigris provides only one corvette and a destroyer for extra protection. It will take time till the shipyards start pouring thousands of cheap ships, but on galactic scale it means little. Traveling to Terra, for example, would take a decade of real time. A week of ship time later, we arrive at a Segmenta Ultima naval base, where 5 battleships and 1,000 of lesser ships wait for another deployment. Rose goes to confer with the Admiral and requisition some of these ships for herself. A dozen bolt-arounds later, the fleet changes leadership and gets split up to her wishes. 1 battleship, 1 battle cruiser and a dozen light cruisers, then 20 frigates and 50 destroyers become part of my battle group. It's a huge display of political and military power that the Inquisitor just achieved with minimal loss of life. The new stormtroopers of the Inquisition are transferred on the Victory-class battleship, to secure it more firmly. A single battleship has 1 million serfs and crew on board, and it needs a powerful army to keep loyal, even in better times. It also has 100 lance batteries, so it is well suited for the fringe, where there would be few ammunition depots for macro cannon shells. The Weasel guy goes with them, now dressed as a Navy admiral. He even cleaned the blood from the uniform, so nobody suspects anything. But even if they did, nobody comments out loud. Rose is still an Inquisitor, even if in private she is rather sweet with me. Decimar hesitates to propose a marriage for now, as the woman holds too much power anyway. Only a Lord Inquisitor could check on Rose, or perhaps the High Lords on Terra. I'm happy with things as they are. A powerful Inquisitor on my side is rather beneficial. Well, beside an unexpected bolted to my head. Still, my new destroyer is loaded with my kids and sent to relieve our Viontax. No point is risking the kids in a fleet action, should I die in Tyrannid Jaws or something. Then we head for Sutha, and I return to my favorite pastime. Making babies and repairing STC templates. I have acquired a dozen Agri-World templates, tractors and trains and various grain haulers. They are a mess, as expected. But I can fix them, it's what I do. Fear the Iron Fist, for its grip is death. 00010011100. See? Even the implant spirit agrees. We arrive at Sutha by accident or miracle. Traveling through hell is always risky. The mechanical Geller generator pulsed twice during the trip, which doesn't fill me with confidence for their reliability. Navigators are almost blinded by the powerful beacon emanated by the ancient Zeno artifact buried here. Also, 3 destroyers failed to arrive at our destination, and are presumed lost. The corvette didn't make it either, despite having 2 Geller fields. They might end up in a different system, if they were lucky. We hold a short prayer for their souls, just as our lander begin loading up troops and servitors. I expect a ton of problems to pop up soon enough, because this is hell and a nice way out would disturb many futures. My tech priests begin setting up orbital defenses around Sutha, using asteroids and servitors to create a ring of forts and defense stations, paired with minefields and hidden torpedo launchers. Meanwhile, my Rose goes to commandeer the local Astartes chapter, called the Scythes _of the Emperor, with not much success. Space Marine are fiercely independent, and they were given this system by Robute Gulaman himself. In the end, Rose is accepted by the Astartes, after a thorough examination of her Inquisitor credentials. I admit, I was a bit worried, but it seems she is the real thing. I mean, every noble house has protocols for recognizing Inquisitors ingrained in their implants and studied as well, just like protocols for every government officials. Coded data engrams are emitted by the sanctified Rosetta emblems, and there are other ways to verify, including DNA scans and purity seals. The problem is, the Imperium hasn't changed those protocols for 10,000 years, and a crafty Chaos Sorcerer or a traitor Marine would know them as well. Surprisingly enough, my own presence seems the deciding factor, paired with Sergeant Ludvius. It seems some rumors have reached even this distant Astartes chapter. I deny everything, of course, even when invited to visit their citadel and examine some damaged machines or templates. I'm not a miracle worker, for Emperor's sake. Still, I can help them a little, by replacing some old machines with my own models, as a trade. Broken Land Raider tanks might be useless for the Marines, but I can trade them further to some Forged World. I intend to visit Triplex_Fal soon, and perhaps Istobon_3. I just need something valuable to trade, and the Scythes have just given me 40 valuable trade goods, even a broken glaive heavy tank. In return, I gifted them 4 brand new fell blades and 200 Hydra tanks, which made them quite pleased. But 1,000 Marines on my side are worth a tiny sacrifice. Even so, my heavy armor company has grown in power significantly. Isolated as they were here on Sutha, this poor Marine chapter was somehow forgotten, and they were too proud to ask the Mechonicus for new machines, or allow tech priests to repair the broken ones. Well, their loss and possibly another big favor for me. Especially if I can reverse engineer the Vulkite carronade from the glaive. That incendiary gun should work wonders on any organic target, including Tyrannid biotitans and the larger bioships. Deep structural scans take a whole week, and Minoris almost has a brain orgasm when touching the ancient gun. Rose has a dozen real orgasms instead, and she promises to unlock her contraceptive implant once we are free of this mission. Constructing the defenses, both in space and on the ground, takes a whole year, and we only have to chase away a single Eldar scout ship. Still, the game is up. If one Farseer has seen us changing things, worse enemies will soon follow. The Eldars are masters at diverting enemies toward the Imperium, the sneaky Slanch victims. They know eternal suffering is their only fate, so they try to doom everyone else first. Rose keeps trying to unlock the security seals that guard the Xenopharos. Inquisitorial privilege should be sufficient, yet it takes a long time, as every new seal reveals another locked door or force field barrier. The walls of the Xenobunker are quite impenetrable, and using maximum firepower might damage the very mechanism we're trying to access. So it takes time. Then the warp opens and spills out a host of demonized ships, all painted red. At least 100 escort ships and 3 grand cruisers with unknown modifications. They are most likely Red Corsairs, not that I intend to ask for names. Auspex sensors, all fleet, go autistic. Vox channels switch to Litany Sigma 03. Nothing may be sent or received except via the litany. I demand in a command tone as the machine spirit starts warming up for combat. I bring up the system map, and feel my bodyguard's hand on my shoulder. It's a show of support and kindness, which is really appreciated. The Inquisitor is still underground, with 100 Space Marines as her guard, while the entrance to the Pharos is guarded by 2 armor battalions and the Stormtrooper regiment. She should be all right, as long as I can hold the orbitals. The Chaos Worshippers advance at full speed, a bit faster than possible for those types of old warships. Well, logic is out already. They have some kind of magic user speeding them up. And Psychers are very versatile. Chaos Sorcerer presence confirmed. All ship's crew prepare to receive orders. By shuttle or teleport. I send out fleet-wide. Wenshin nods and stares at the greenish hologram in deep thought. We need fighters out front. Then form a battle line while the victory advances. He proposes after a minute of comparing strategy and tactics in his mind. I shake my head. Classic naval tactics, and relying of the sturdy battleship as an icebreaker. The traitors have studied the same manuals. If I wanted to win with 80% losses, I could use this tactic. But I've read enough history. Hannibal would have wasted these morons just as easily. Opening the command console, I start sending vectors to each ship individually. It only takes a minute, and will likely save most of our lives. Our formation opens up, as the Victory and the light cruisers and frigates start retreating behind the orbital defenses, while I lead 20 destroyers of the left flank, and the other battle cruiser leads 20 more destroyers in and wide arc to the right. Sure, the planet will be exposed for some time, but that's why the defenders of this agri-world are all rushing to dig in, under void shields and ground-to-orbit lasers. Lances and torpedoes start flying towards my ships, followed soon by Chaos fighters and bombers. But the range keeps getting larger as the flanking groups move away, and the center battle group falls back. Soon enough, the enemy fighters and torpedoes smash into our defenses, hitting mines or getting targeted by missiles and LUS cannons. Even macro cannons loaded with flak shells fire from the orbital forts, and decimate the incoming wave. Defensive fire from the frigates and cruisers finishes off the rest, with a single cruiser eating a lucky torpedo. Its void shield fails and the cruiser is ordered to flee and return when the damage has been repaired. Group Center. Launch fighters now. Hunt those bombers. I order as I compute intercept vectors in on my 7th implant. 1,000 space fighters, including some piloted by scythes, make short work of Chaos unescorted bombers, blowing up the demon engines with little effort. The litany tracks the Chaos fleet with the Lance batteries, but I decide to hold fire for now, waiting for their commander to commit his forces. I know he can't peek into my mind or future, so he has no other option now. Retreat would be his best choice after losing his precious corrupted space fighters. Then a destroyer to my port veers off, and heads for the planet. Damn it. A traitor captain, or perhaps a successful teleport. My Lance batteries turn and collapse its void shield before it goes too far. Group left. Ranged weapons only, target the defector. Immobilize, board and subdue it. I demand while scrolling through ship logs. There. The machine spirit did detect an energy spike, visible on the low infrared auspex. But I ordered them to be set on autistic mode, to prevent such events. Someone didn't listen. I repeat myself. Set all auspex and augury sensors in autistic mode. Do not give the enemy away on board. I explain on the Vox channel, still keeping watch on the movements of the Chaos fleet. It takes an hour for them to decide. Retreat would condemn the leaders to eternal suffering, as Chaos doesn't tolerate failure. The 3 grand cruisers with a bunch of tentacles moving about head the charge, straight into the trap. In groups of 3, group left destroyers engage their escorts. I announce on the Vox channel. We leave the corrupted destroyer and 2 boarding destroyers behind and swing around, hitting the enemy in the flank, the course angled to pass behind them as they reach our center. A single assault shuttle filled with tech priest and servitors stays to aid the recapture of the illustrious sacrifice, the boarded destroyer. We launch our own torpedoes and fire every weapon at full strength. I do not intend to salvage Chaos-infested ships, and scraps will be easier to push into the sun. Torpedoes are wonderful, especially with servitor pilots. My cruiser doesn't misses even once, and the machine spirit is happy as we score a dozen kills with 24 torpedoes and an hour of constant battering demon-infested hulls. Then the right enveloping attack arrives as well, just as the battleship starts pounding the Chaos ships with its formidable batteries. The damned traitors do not retreat and fight to the last, and I have to keep rotating damaged ships from the front line. The Chaos fleet launches assault landers on the planet, straight into the Scythe Citadel, and Pharos air defense, which is aided by Hydra tanks anti-air cover. Missiles and multi-lasers, along with fighters, blow up half of them before they land, and our forts and frigates firing from orbit catch half of the remainders on landing, resulting in huge craters filled with melted armor and charred flesh. Then the Chaos Sorcerer teleports just at the entrance of the Xenopharos, and pushes through, losing most of his traitor Terminators to Fellblade fire. Every other Chaos Marine gets engaged by the Astartes company, and only the foul Sorcerer escapes. By himself he struggles on, reaching the Inquisitor and her retinue. How cute! A psyker. My Rose quips and holds up a finger accusingly. Foolish woman, now, what is happening? He yells in despair, as his powers vanish under a blank aura. I always loved digital weapons. The Inquisitor comments in a cool voice, as her ring discharges and vaporizes the head of the traitor. Justine nods in turn, and kicks the headless corpse, sending it back into the warp, the red and burning soul still screaming in despair as it returns to hell. The outcome justifies the deed. My mother murmurs in a low tone. I maintain the communication blackout for another week, directing destroyers and frigates to vaporize small hull fragments and bodies, while the cruisers took on the harder task of collecting and pushing the larger wrecks into the system's sun. Only when the all-clear from the surface came, on the Vox channel, did I lift the blackout. After all, the enemies that have landed have been accounted for. No prisoners as it happens. What would I ask the cretins? Where is their secret base? Who is their leader? Would you please repent and come back to the good side? Fuck that. I had a much better tool at my disposal than some lying traitor. And 2 months later, Rose did get access to the Pharos, the alien device possibly built by the Old Ones. The Old One doesn't play dice is a famous quote from a famous physicist from the past, who knew Einstein was actually right. But I bet he didn't imagine the galaxy inhabited by demons and Xenos by the trillions, while many of those Xenos, like the Orc, Eldar and Jokero, were created by the Old Ones to combat the C'tan and the Necrons. Taking my Mona Lisa lander, I descend on the surface, observing the devastation wreaked by the small number of traitor Marine that have managed to reach the planet. Every one of the powered armored traitors had the capability of a powerful tank, but much more agile and mobile. Less than a company of Chaos Marines survived, and almost broke through an armor regiment and an Astartes chapter. Almost. The Inquisition's stormtrooper regiment suffered the worst, without heavy tanks and power armor to balance the odds. A dozen chimeras and 1,000 guards died for every single traitor they managed to kill. A sad reminder that humans were too weak in the face of this galaxy's horrors. Obadiah, the Marines chapter master, meets me as I land, and shakes my hand. A great victory for the Emperor, Lord Lancefire, he announces as his brothers cheer in loud voices. I almost sigh inward. I did very little, except stopping others from making mistakes. Didn't even manage a perfect record of that. Glad to be of service, my lord. I intend to enter the Pharos myself, if that's all right? I wonder in a humble tone. This guy is almost twice my height with his power armor and 2 large scythes on his back. Makes me feel small and weak. For your service, I will allow it, Captain. Don't touch anything though. Warsmith Barabast Antioch has studied the ancient device for many years before he could attempt to delve into its mysteries. The Astartes leader says in a colder voice. Yeah. He doesn't like a stranger nosing into the Pharos, since he was named Warden by Primarch Guilliman. However, he does owe me a bit, and he knows it. The halls of the Pharos are made of some sort of living rock, and I feel sensations and emotions brush against my mind. Almost like a machine spirit, though without the familiar babble of prayers and recitations. Some time later, after passing endless tunnels and stairs and barriers, we reach the central chamber, where an alien machine called the Sounding Board controls the artifact. It does look a bit like a DJ console, with a myriad of tuning dials and flips and tabs and gauges. As I get closer, I start sensing the operation manual downloading into my mind. It seems the machine has deemed me compatible. Must be my implants. Beside the beacon, its known function and the reason it was called a Pharos, or lighthouse, I sense other directions and currents. I could step on Ultramar with ease, if I want. I could also lock onto Jiren and bring him here. Or just say hi in his mind. I do so anyways. It's Pef, my mentor. I met Justine and she says thanks. I tell him in a gleeful tone. I thought you couldn't use astropaths. If that's really you. The explorator Margus says in a suspicious voice. Mind voice. Well, I can't prove anything from this far away. Anyhow, Justine works with this pretty lady Inquisitor, and she has access to some mind device that works even for blanks. Cool, right? I ask rhetorically. You didn't. Jiren exclaims, sensing something in my thoughts. We're not getting married, me and Rose. Just some bed fun while I help her with some task. By the way, please send a full transport to every forge around. I will travel to Estobon soon. I explain while waving politely at my Rose. I'm convinced now. Only my idiot pupil would have a fling with an Inquisitor and call it fun. May the Omnissiah guard your soul. Jiren says with relief and admonishment. I change targets to my son, Victor, and check on Oliva, My capital. Everything seems okay, except a new emperor cult has risen among the lower caste, which makes people more faithful and pliant. Victor seems rather happy. Interrogate and execute all the cult leaders. And find what alien is behind it. I order with an inner snort. Good things do not happen in hell. If they do, it's only a long-term plot to undermine the planet for easier conquest. Elder, gene stealer or chaos, someone would be behind such a cult and ruin my day. Find anything, Lord Pef? The Inquisitor asks, as I've been staring at the glowing console for a long time. Yes. I'll need some armchairs and food brought down, I say without explaining. Ludvius pats my head in a familiar gesture. You never fail to amaze, Captain Pef. 1,000 tech priests and the Inquisitor fail to make any progress and you do it in a minute. Lord Obadiah nods at me with some respect. He probably knows what I could do now, since his War Master had similar control over the sounding board. Nothing to do with sound, I suspect, perhaps only as cosmic vibrations and energies. I don't reveal anything, because demons. Secrets are only safe in my head, and perhaps with my mother or my son. Those that are not blanks can always turn into enemies, or much easier than a blank anyway. An hour later, I lounge in my armchair and sip some wine, while Rose and Justine drink tea and chat in a soft whisper. Repairs and reclamation on Suta and in orbit continue without my guidance, as the Imperium of Man is quite used to clean up operations after being invaded. Happens everywhere, even on Terra itself. It takes a full week to get a grip on the main controls, and locate the Necron capital among a billion other systems in this sector. Not easy, but I get lucky sometimes. Then, I simply move the light beam of the Pharos lighthouse on a new target, although it's not a beam nor a light. The focus is tighter too, to avoid splashing nearby human planets. Rose opens her eyes wide, while she stares at her tarot cards, the human method of reading the future. The psychic cards themselves float in midair, spin a few times as if confused, and fall down in a different pattern. Mission complete. We'll need a bigger fleet, I say out loud, without trying to look at the shifting figures on the tarot. If a mere tarot card reacts like this, the gods of this galaxy will react much worse. Rose steps away and smiles at me for a second, then she vanishes in a violet flash. Teleport is so useful. There's only me and Justin here, with my Astartes standing guard a few meters behind. Your gift was very useful, Mother. That sorcerer didn't stand a chance, I say in praise. She nods shyly, probably not used to compliments. He was very strong though. Took all my focus to lock him down. I suspect it's like a muscle, Mother. You need training and practice, then low-level enemies to test yourself. Just like any soldier trains. I advise her in a gentle tone. Justine blinks and smiles. The Astartes steps beside me and stops me before I take another gulp of wine. You also need to know when to stop and rest. Space Marines have superior bodies, you don't, Lord Pef. No more wine. I grit my teeth and sigh in defeat. Perhaps he is right. I was among the few who stood against many. The brother who spilled his brother's blood. 0011110000001. Okay then. I can take a hint. Although the damned quotes should come with a source, or they lack proper context. Drawing a lever, the armchair lowers and I drift into sleep. While our troops and ships at Suta prepare for the next inevitable invasion, I return to my favorite pastime. And since the planet is an ugly world, there are dozens of STC templates that I can obtain and engineer, as well as test and donate my other designs to the farms and merchants. Of course, a normal rogue trader would try to sell such machines as luxuries and receive millions of thrones in return. But my goals are much, much greater than mere peddling goods from one system to another, like most rogue traders do. Goodwill is also much more precious. A squad of Scythe Space Marines join my retinue without paying a single throne. Led by a slightly rookie Captain Mansirius Thracius of the 3rd Company, this squad is tasked with keeping the secret of the Pharos, by guarding my person. It is called the Oath of Moment, also known as the Aegean Oath. This Oath of Moment was kept within Mount Pharos, a parchment signed by Robute Gilliam himself. Now that I know the secret, I am quite valuable for the Scythes. Either way, they will not allow me to fall into enemy hands. Probably they are ordered to shoot me, if I seem to get captured. I wonder if Ludvius has the same orders. Who I am kidding. Of course, he does. The Imperium is known to have destroyed entire planets, even whole marine chapters to keep some secrets. Poor Pef doesn't rank that high anyway. Possibly only the Inquisitor's presence and company has turned fate in my favor. The politics of the Imperium are literally cutthroat, in this case, mine. 6 months later, just as I finish a brand new template for a tractor harvester and tried to work once more on the Geller generator, another fleet arrives. Luckily it's the reinforcements that Rose has called for, another Victory battleship, 2 Mars-class battlecruisers armed with Nova cannons and an Overlord-class battlecruiser armed with many Lance batteries. There is a method to the fleet requests, as long-range fire is more desirable for defense, plus the lack of munitions would make macro cannons a liability here in the Eastern Fringe. A squadron of 20 more frigates and 20 destroyers form the extra escorts. Immediately, we begin updating the combat protocols for the newly arrived ships, as well as moving some torpedoes to the ships that have already expended theirs. The Imperial Navy needs fleet tenders, transport ships that can resupply a fleet when away from a naval base, but due to politics, the Mechonicus will not allow forges on naval ships, and the Navy will not allow Mechonicus ships in their battle groups. There are some exceptions, like Inquisitor black ships, various ecclesiastic battleships or the battle barges of the Astartes that can freely join any group they want, just like renowned rogue traders can. I the nice Overlord battlecruiser with hungry eyes. I would like a few of those for myself, but even if I could convince a Forge World to build one for me, I'd still have to wait 800 to 1000 years. If I'm lucky and that forge is not attacked in the meantime. Nearly every Navy captain grumbles when I explain how to use or not use the Auspex and augury sensors, then how to move the ships on my exact vectors. That destroyer you see being repaired in orbit? Didn't listen and was taken over by teleporting boarders. Saved me a bolt round as their captain was found half melted into his chair. The brain was still alive though. He is now a happy servitor for the Mechonicus. I comment in a careless tone. We try a few fleet maneuvers, though without live-firing expendable ammunition. There are never enough torpedoes. Just as the fleet speeds away on their agreed practice zones, the void opens up to unleash the next surprise. A Necron cruiser and a couple of escorts. They possibly don't like getting targeted by our beacon, and getting swarmed by Tyranids like a flock of cats would run after a laser pointer. Desist your foolish plans, humans. The Necron Lord speaks on my Vox speed, before I manage to send the blackout order. The machine spirit does it for me. A sure sign a cruiser's spirit is at least sentient if not sapient. Then I focus on spreading the ships even more, to cover the planet from all sides, while the battle cruisers and battleships accelerate towards the Xeno ships, firing all weapons. Light cruisers act as escorts, while the actual escorts keep a wary distance from the powerful Necron beam weapons. It's difficult to target and hit the more advanced Necron ships, a dozen of their light units returning heavy levels of fire, just like our battlecruisers can. Their only cruiser has battleship strength weapons, and one Victory-class battleship has to turn away after losing 2 void shields. I urge the litany to move in the free slot, and unload our special torpedoes once we get in range. From 24 torpedoes only 3 hit the Necron cruiser, but it is enough. The Necron vessel is damaged and slows down, then takes a Nova cannon straight on, and our heavies pound the fried cruiser to scrap. Their light escort flee, after blowing up a destroyer, the one under repair. Unlucky ship, and the first ship under my command to be lost. We only manage to blow one more Necron escort before the ships vanish. However, compared to other encounters with the Necrons where the Navy lost a dozen ships for a single kill, I still managed to do better. Rose seems very pleased with my command and lets me keep the post. Don't worry about the lost Cobra, my dear. I fear we will lose many more ships soon. She whispers to me in private. I sadly have to agree. The chaos will return, and humanity has many other enemies. The ships enter a new repair and rearm cycle while I return to Suit Hut to check the sounding board for real-time news. On Aliva there's a small rebellion, and we had lost 1,000 grenadiers rooting out some ugly Gene Stealer infiltrator, guarded by brainwashed zealots. Retribution was attacked by an orc rock, but we had 1,000,000 armed servitors to massacre the 1,000,000 orcs. The tech priests are rather amused by the pathetic invasion. Antax has received the first transport ship filled with relics, and are extremely grateful. Jiren is loading up 2 more ships for Metallica and Tigris, but the navigators are worried about the changed position of the psychic beacon. They urge him to wait a year or 2 for the immaterium currents to settle. The Citadel of the Scythes gets 1,000 tech priests to oversee the exterior defenses, building sentry turrets and minefields, and posting more combat servitors beside the auxiliary regiments of the Astartes. Sadly, the Marines are too paranoid and won't let the Mechanicus upgrade their void shields or repair some broken machines. Instead, they have an entire company sent to be trained as tech Marines, so they can do repairs themselves. It's something I guess, though I doubt we'll have enough time for that plan to work. I am teaching my own Astartes guards all I can, from officer courses and some basic science or logic. It's hard work, not because they are stupid but because they are too faithful. Then again, they are implanted with the genocide carrying the essence of the Emperor. Having Jiren as a long-range contact has calmed my fears a bit, because he was the one who raised me, in place of my warrior father or missing mother. I mean, it was a second life, but I was still a child, with all that implies. These days I would compare my education to a few doctorates in various sciences and a war academy. So yes, I am grateful to Jiren even though I suspect he had other projects involved with his mentorship, beside doing the Inquisition a favor. Doing it myself, with my own children, so can't throw a stone for this. I decide to test the Pharos displacement ability by sending the newly born kids directly to Elivar. It takes some misdirection to bring a few young kids inside toolboxes and have them return empty to my cruiser, but it eventually works. Serena receives the kids in a warm pool, because I wasn't certain how high or low the translation would send them. And with the transfer proved possible, a new era begins. Instantaneous travel across stellar distances is a huge deal, for me and my close allies. It's probably heresy to use Xeno artifacts without the Inquisition's blessing. I better consult Rose on this, and figure out a system to use it. Sending agents across the system or inserting assassins would be quite valuable for her work. I wait till we're alone in bed, before I explain while she is filled with happy thoughts and endorphins. It is a nice discovery, my dear. Too bad it needs someone to operate it with his mind. Adranos could use a vacation on Cypramundi, and try to obtain some more ships. My beloved Inquisitor muses out loud. I hug her naked body closer, and draw her into a long kiss. The weasel guy? I ask to make sure. Careful there. He will be an Inquisitor soon enough. A few more missions to harden himself. However, your mother is hopeless. Decent assassin I suppose, but she needs constant guidance and support. Rose murmurs in my neck. I sadly have to agree. Justine is scared of her own shadow. Literally. Her blank aura terrifies her, although it is such a potent weapon against all the warp monsters or warp users. The similar Tyrannid ability is called a shadow in the warp, a warp presence that can blockade entire star systems from navigators and astropaths. Now, if only I can give humanity the same ability. My mother should not be wasted like this. I could use 1,000 brothers, just like me. I mutter softly, and notice Ludvius perk up at once. He thumbs up at me secretly, though Rose can obviously sense his movements. Rose hums inward, then turns to look at the Blood Angel Marine. Like him, you mean? But sane. I nod in silence. Sanity would be great. In another year, using the bigger fleet at my disposal and thousands of tech priests and 1,000,000 servitors, we have constructed a rather solid defense ring around the planet. Iron and nickel, even iridium and tungsten-filled asteroids dragged into orbit and fortified with spare or improvised weapons. My onboard forge is churning more missiles and less cannons now, after it made 1,000 plasma reactors to be installed as power sources for the new forts. Sadly, we're on limited supplies of torpedoes, and those need a full forge world to get produced. I asked Antax's fabricator to send me everything they can spare, torpedoes and fighters and bombs and perhaps another manufactorum ship. Their help doesn't arrive in time. A small hive fleet descends upon Sutha, possibly drawn by the psychic emitter of the Pharos. It's only 1,000 bioships, but they are scary enough. Rose and all the psychers in the fleet are useless now, and some of them faint or gibber in near madness. I order all of them sedated and kept close to the Geller fields. Damn Tyranids and their suppressive powers. Humanity lacks long-range FTE communications and depends of astropaths. And while I could fake an astropath, the empathic mind link of the Pharos needs some form of soul connection to the target. I can barely trust a few people with that, so calling for help from strangers is out. They would probably suspect me of being a demon anyway. The bioships warp gravity and move quite fast, although they slow down significantly as they approach the sun's gravity. I can already foresee how to use this weakness against them, but I don't have gravity-based weapons. Not yet. The Savant implant is engaged at full strength as I compile a battle plan in my mind. All ships, group in tight formation with escorts as close as possible, just behind our forts. Mars and light cruisers detach to the left and defend the fort line. I command, while glancing at Wenshin. My uncle is pale white and trembles a little, although the fight hasn't even started. I have 2 Navy admirals on my bridge, and they seem just as scared, although they control themselves better. The Auspex crew all look at me with hope in their eyes. Not a miracle worker, guys. This horror fights neither for power nor territory, but rather to feed a hunger so insatiable that it will eventually devour the entire galaxy. 00011110000. Yes, I think I even recognize that quote. But thanks. Flanking tactics do not work on the bugs, rogue trader. One of the admirals explains in a polite voice. I nod in acceptance. Perhaps that's true, Admiral. Still, these Nids don't have a queen. I would be ashamed if we lose a single ship again. I add with a thin smile. The crew perks up and the Navy guys blink in disbelief. My Astartes guard pats my shoulder and points at holoscreen. Another old Terran history lesson, Lord Pef? Sadly yes. I can learn from the bad guys too. Fortifications tend to make troops to squash themselves against the closest defensive barrier, like a wall or road ditch. But if you have a weapon position to fire along that wall or ditch, from the side? It's called enfilade. The cruelest type of massacre. The light cruisers extend the line to the left, still behind the asteroid barrier, with the Mars cruisers ending the line, almost out of their firing range. The Hive fleet dives straight for the planet, hungry for biomass. Our fighters hold station to defend the ships from boarding pods and spores. But torpedoes and lance batteries begin wreaking havoc on the closely packed bioships. The frigates and destroyers support the line with close-range fire. A barrage of fire and death holds the incoming wave at the fort line, and the forts themselves fire continuously from point-blank range. The Tyranids bunch up yet again, trying to force their way through by sheer numbers. As our torpedoes get expended, they seem to almost succeed. Mars cruisers, advance beyond the fort line and execute high-energy turn towards the enemy. Fire your Nova_cannon at optimal range. I command as the Tyranids ships manage to shatter a few forts and break through. I unleash the Litany's last torpedoes at the writhing swarm of tendrils and hungry mouths. A dozen wounded void organisms explode in a shower of gore and guts and plasma. The lance batteries finish off the dying bioships before they can extend harpoons and tendrils to grapple my ship. Void's shields to maximum. I shout at the Vox channel. A blue flare passes over my fleet, and then 2 blinding lights as the Nova cannons detonate in the midst of the huge Tyranid swarm. Our Auspex sensors are blinded for a minute, but as the windows lose the protective tint I can simply look out the window. More than half of the Hive fleet is gone and the survivors are all bleeding and floating listless. Destroyers, target the smallest bioships individually. Capital ships, focus fire on the largest enemies that remain. Frigates, maintain protective cover. Light cruisers, free to engage as well, at high speed. I send on a fleet-wide channel. Without autistic sensors, I do have a much clearer view of the battlefield. It's almost like playing an RTS, with a bolter to your head if you mess up. The Litany begs in mind to be sent forward as well and rip the enemy to shreds. Not yet, buddy. Long-range augury, maximum power to X-ray scanners. I ask my cousin manning the console. We have the extra 7% range and an enemy might not be cautious enough. Contact, far range, above elliptic. Eldar ship possibly. The Auspex station reports just as the Eldar engage their holographic field and vanish. I sigh inward. Damn elves with future-seeing powers. They may be sneaky and crafty, but the Tyranids are invisible for them just like I am. And soon, their craft world will cross the path of the largest tendril from Hive Fleet Kraken. No need to beg them to help. They will fight or be eaten alive. I just worry what other foe they might send next. Probably the Orcs. Even with 2 battleships and the whole supporting fleet it will be bad, since a large WOG ignores physical laws. I just wonder why they are trying to save the Necrons. Damn it. Xeno minds and Xeno reasons. Probably trying to revive some dead Eldar god. Or just weaken the Imperium. Probably both of these reasons and a dozen more. Thousands of Tyranid spores survive our blockade and make landing on Sutha, and I order the nearest ships to fire beam weapons at the landing sites. It's orbital bombardment and not friendly fire. A quarter of the planet bursts into huge forest fires and volcanic eruptions and 1 million civilians die. They won't be eaten alive, so it's perhaps Emperor's mercy. Our fighters and frigates strain to contain the invasion, and on the ground the regiments and the Marines fight the Tyranids' organisms in close combat, too close for orbital fire support. The Litany unloads all the crack missiles and lets them descend through the atmosphere in near free fall, before engaging the long-range cogitators and target the biggest bugs they can find. Like the fists of the Emperor, crack missiles impact the hated enemies at tremendous speed, shattering their carapace armor and explode deep inside. With this final aid, the regiments and the Scythe Marines, aided by the tech priests and servitors, have a larger chance of victory, as the Tyranid forces are denied their greatest champions. You can go, if you want. I'll be in my study room, I tell my guard Marines, including Ludvius. With a polite nod, the Scythe Squad and the Death Watch Marine check the Auspex sensors one last time before rushing for an assault shuttle. Combat is bred into them, and a dozen Space Marines would turn the tide even more. Ludvius pats my head and stays. Not getting rid of me so easily, sneaky trader. He comments as Minoris glances at me in confusion. That was quick, Revelator. Did we lose a ship again? He asks me with childish innocence. Nah. I haven't drank wine for a week. My cogitators worked at full efficiency today, so 0 loses. I explain, half joking. Then I open a bottle and take a long gulp. The taste is, damn it. Who drugged my wine? As I fall into my armchair, I see Justine hold her thumb up at Ludvius.